Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the February 4th meeting of our committee work sessions. We can go ahead and let the record reflect that all members of the council are here and accounted for. And we'll move straight to the city administrator update. Mr. Probst.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of quick items. Church Street and Davis Street traffic calming items that I brought to you a month or so ago are now out for bid, and we will have those bids back for you next month after we go through them to get started on that construction project. Loganville water line contracts have been executed. We'll be setting up a pre-construction meeting shortly, and we'll be turning dirt very soon on that. It's taken quite a while to get together, but that'll be a great project for everyone. We have our planning retreat, as a reminder, that'll be on Wednesday, February 19th at 3 o'clock here at City Hall. Developing the agenda now, I'll be sending that out to you as soon as possible. And one last item, if we could move the utilities committee report number 4 up to the top as a courtesy to Mr. Thompson, who has some family arrangements he needs to take care of tonight.
Great. Could I have a motion to go ahead and move utilities to Part 2, Number 1, right ahead of finance?
Move we approve.
We have a motion by Ross. Second by Mr. Adcock. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We'll move electric and telecom to number 1 under committee reports. Logan, anything else?
Oh, that's all, Mayor.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving to central services, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, sir. Quick, the police station municipal court building, the contract was actually executed earlier today. We have performance and payment bonds en route. They were required to submit those and have them in possession within 3 days of the contract signing. I look for a pre-construction meeting probably sometime next week, and then we'll get that started. Our internship, I had talked about last month that we were interviewing, going through that. We actually hired Arthur Enlow from the University of Georgia. He'll be with us through the spring and probably early summer months. Under the CIP this year, we purchased 2 vehicles for central services already, which should be 12 to 16-week lead time, I believe. And our badge pass security system for the water plant and those offices were also purchased. And then one thing I know Logan had sent out to the council about the MIT government lab study that was done on municipal websites and whatnot. We were actually awarded an A with their scores and the way they do their modeling to determine that, we have a transparent website that we keep updated. We make sure that we're within so many clicks of the initial visit of the site. That was something that, we'd taken on a couple years ago, and we've worked hard on it, and it's an all-the-time thing, too, and there's many people that are helping with that. So I thought that was a good score, especially in our county. We were the higher-rated city in our county for the website. So any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Congratulations on the A rating, and please thank our IT department for the work that they put in on that.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yes, sir. Moving to committee information, we'll go straight to electric and telecom.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Little?
First item is the monthly electric and telecom report, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Little, and thank y'all for moving us to the front. Over the past couple of months, we've worked on several projects, and I listed a good number of them here, and I just want to go over them. It's amazing how many commercial projects we have actually touched in the past year. So John Supermarket, we designed and installed that. That is ready for, completely ready for their electric and telecom needs when they get finished with their project. The 1 Street, which is the apartment complex at the mill on South Broad, that is 95% complete. We're waiting on the developer. That took a lot of work. That site was not quite as ready as the developer thought, and there were a lot of moving parts to that. But I'm happy to say we're sitting there waiting on them. Silver Queen designed and installed. Grace Church, we have designed that. Installation has started. If you'll notice, we changed 1 pole already to facilitate their installation without hurting them when we when we change out the North Broad project. Second phase of Stone Creek, design and install. The house moves for Mr. Holder. That design is done, waiting on Mr. Holder to make the moves on the homes. Recycling center out at Oxford, we actually will be turning that on tomorrow. Patrick passed their electric installation yesterday, so we'll be turning them on. We started the design on the Amichis at Church Street. The downtown Wi-Fi is designed and installed. We'll talk about that in a minute. Town Green, we've got initial designs done. We're waiting on the final layout that y'all approve, hopefully shortly. North Madison is designed. We hope to be bidding that out next month. South Madison, we have started design discussions with Georgia Power as they transverse that route for a good way of that. And then Highland Avenue, we've started our design discussions internally. Everything else, as far as the departments, is looking normal for the year. I'll take any questions you may have.
Brian, what's the work on Madison?
On north or south?
Either one.
That is the reconductor on both those roads. Those are going to be a major tie. We found out during the Irma that we had lacking energy capacity on the south end of town, especially in the jail, back over to the Mill Village. We had, the capacity of those wires was very, very lacking. I'll just put it that way. Couldn't get enough current down there when we lost Highway 11. So we're redesigning those for a reconductor, change out probably 90% of the poles. It'll be a very conventional construction, though, not like the Spring Street with the ductile iron. It'll be conventional wood pole construction.
That's on both ends.
Sir?
That's North Madison also.
North Madison and South Madison.
Brian, could you give us an update on the project right across the street from Marable up to meet the downtown segment of Broad with the improvements of those sidewalks?
Well, that's gonna fall under the TAP grant program.
Okay.
So that's being designed and engineered right now, and actually, the mayor just handed me a letter a moment ago that it's been assigned a PI number, which means it's programmed for the state now.
Moving on.
It's moving on. As with all federally funded and state-funded projects, a little slow, but our skin in the game is a lot less. So it's tracking right now. What we may do in the meantime is try to stabilize some of the poorer sections of the sidewalk until we actually get to that construction.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brian? If not, we'll look at your next item, which you said is Wi-Fi.
Yes, sir. So over the past several months, or going on a year, we have discussed this project. There's two parts to this project. The one will be the internal. Our internal Wi-Fi systems here at our offices and all our facilities are lacking in a couple of ways: capacity and in security. So we looked at that. That was one thing we looked at. The other thing we're looking at is ways to make our current telecom customers sticky, meaning that they don't want to leave us. They want to stay our customer no matter what. And one thing that we looked at that a lot of other businesses are doing is putting Wi-Fi available in their community for their customers. Met with Sadie, talked with her and her staff, and they've been wanting this, I don't know, Sadie, for 2 years, maybe 3. Sort of glad we waited or we delayed it. We met a company called Ruckus through this process. Ruckus supplies all the Wi-Fi for the state university systems. So they do most of their campuses, most of all that backhaul. They're owned by a company called CommScope. You may have heard of them. We buy a lot of telecommunications stuff through CommScope. So what we did is we met with Ruckus. We set out some equipment in the downtown area, and we've been testing it for, 2 months. Sometime in December, we put it out. The gear that we have out testing works well, works great, but it is the last generation of non-AC Wi-Fi. So the gear we're asking to buy now is the latest and greatest 1 gig capable Wi-Fi equipment that can handle up to 1,000 customers per unit, a little over 1,000, but I'm not exactly sure the exact number. He just told me it's over 1,000. Mike and them know that. Anyway, this project will cover all of downtown. It'll cover the town green, but it is also expandable to anywhere this council decides you want to expand this in the future. So say we want to put it in the parks in the future, it's expandable to that. You want to put it on the rails to trails, it's expandable to that. And our idea is that our customers, our telecom customers, would have free access. Anyone from outside the community that wanted to get on would have access, but would have to pay for that access. There's another part to this. So this part is $88,094.76. There is a back office part that authenticates those customers. We have got that down to 2 businesses or 2 software providers. Still not exactly sure which one is the best, and so we will bring that, if we're successful tonight, we'll bring that to y'all next month. That's it in a nutshell, and I can break this down as more technically if you want me to, or I'll try to answer any questions you may have.
On the expansion, if you expand it to the downtown green, or you expand it to Matthews, will that cover everything from this point to there, or that
Not unless y'all
specifically?
want us to. It would be wherever we have a fiber point. So what we would do, let's say y'all said Matthews Park. We want to do Matthews Park. We would get your wants and wishes of what you wanted to cover inside the park. If you want to cover around the lake, if you want to cover walking trails, and then we would give you a plan to do that. But there would be no between here and there. It'd just be
Okay.
here and there.
It's
not
just direct.
in between. Unless you wanted to do it, that would be cost prohibitive, I would believe. I would see the parks, one thing you can do with this system is you can do remote cameras. You can do Wi-Fi cameras along the way that would allow you to, safety. I mean,
Sure.
public's out in the park, something's going on, that you can monitor that. We could bring all that back to a central location. The other thing you can do with this is streetlight control. There's a lot of different things we can do with the system. But first off, it's what people have been asking for. They've been asking for Wi-Fi in the area, and that's our customers have been asking. We're trying to provide that.
So if
How far distance-wise do that cover? I know you said that you can put it from point to point, but in a general area, how
In
far?
the general area, Mr. Garrett, the newer units, we're gonna do 9 downtown at the intersection. So you do the 2 block north and south and 1 block back. So they'll cover about a block if you can see them. Now, there's gonna be some holes. You know, some buildings, I say Court Street is probably gonna be our biggest problem, but I think we've got that figured out. We'll mount one on a street light down Court Street, come in there and just get in the middle and mount that. 1 block is, to answer your question, if I have full view, 1 block is what they cover. But you're not gonna have full view, you're gonna have buildings in between there that we're just going to fill those holes in.
What's the, just a ballpark on the back office cost that you're talking about, that we got to incur?
Around 18.
An additional 18,000?
I think we will be lower than that, but I don't want to go, I'm going to give you a real number. Now, what that will do, Mr. Little, is our plan is to, all city devices, city-owned devices, will be able to access this system through their, what's called a MAC address, or their machine address. So we won't have a password for devices. If it's a city device, it automatically gets on, but we can control that part of the network very specifically. Let's say we lose an employee. We don't have to change all the passwords. We just take their machine out of the network. With the customer-based database, we're going to pull a database from Zcorum, who handles our email and authentication of our cable plant, and Ms. Thompson's billing system, to pull that data and keep that up to date. But the 2 systems we're looking at can handle both of those. One uses our equipment and is cheaper than that 18. The other one uses the provider's equipment and is at that 18.
Now, it shows on here that there was a budget allocation of $150,000.
We had 2 capital improvement projects over the past couple of years to deploy wireless internet. We never spent that money, mainly because we could not find another project that actually worked for us. And then when I first started thinking about this, I talked to y'all about it. We never did really vote on it. We talked about it, that would be a good place for that money.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion to proceed with this?
I had one other question. That, the 88,000 will cover Wi-Fi downtown, is that correct?
Yes, sir, in the town green.
And the town green?
Yes, sir.
The 9 units that you referred to?
Sir?
The 9 units?
No, it'll be 20 units total. It'll be 9 in downtown, several around the town green, and possible walking paths. And there will be other units that we have to use inside, around downtown. There's 20 units that would be bought in this initial bid.
Okay, but that's all the costs that'll be involved to get Wi-Fi throughout downtown?
Yes, sir.
And the town green?
Yes, sir.
Then I'll make that motion for approval, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Larry Bradley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Adcock. All those in favor say aye. Motion carries. We recommend that to full council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Next is the monthly water, sewer, gas, and stormwater report, Mr. Middlebrooks.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Just a couple updates on some projects. We started installing gas in Phase 1, or the remaining part of Phase 1 to Stone Creek. Dixon has asked for gas for Phase 2 and what's remaining of Phase 1. CDBG of 2018, materials been delivered, contractors in town. So they'll be getting the pipe fused up and get ready to pull those. The crews finished up the Wall Road water extension today. They'll start the pressure test and chlorination tomorrow, and the line should be ready to go for those taps out there sometime next week. And then we'll be starting, that same crew will be starting the McDaniel Street drainage project next week too, if weather permits. And that's all the updates I got. If you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you.
That's all we have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Moving to the finance report, Mr. Adcock.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several items on the agenda this evening. We'll start with Ms. Thompson's monthly finance report.
Thank you, Mr. Adcock. One thing I want to point out about the financial status report that you have in front of you as of December, several accruals for year-end have been done since these reports. These are unaudited reports and only a snapshot of what we look like as of December 31st. Obviously, we will bring audited financial reports to you in the coming months. But one good thing is revenues exceeded expenses for all funds for 2019. Some updates for the finance department. Finance staff are working on year-end schedules and entries to get ready for auditors that will be here Monday to begin their 2 weeks of field work for the next 2 weeks. I have met with the ECG staff last week. They have began their electric cost of service study. They anticipate that to take about a month or two, and then they'll bring that and present it to you at that time. We also moved forward to purchase 2 meter reader trucks under the CIP budget. Both came in under budget, and like Mr. Bailey said, that's about a 6 to 8 week lead time to get those in. And that is all I have. If y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Hearing no questions, we'll move to the renewal of property and casualty insurance, and Bob Seville is here to present that this evening.
Okay, I think, does everyone have this spreadsheet in front of them? And your glasses? It's a little small. If you look at the very bottom, I put a number out to the side of that green column. You can see the difference is $21,994. The increase was primarily due to changes in the cyber liability, where we expanded the coverage a little bit. And that's in response to all the things you've seen happening at the other cities. So I think we've done well there to take that step. The automobiles up in the second section went up by about 8 vehicles. not a big change. The inland marine, the equipment went up just a tad. The property went down because we took the food line building off. That'll be under a builder's risk by the time this is effective April 6th. So I think y'all will have that approved and everything rolling on that by then. And we'll be monitoring that to make sure all the insurance, the builder's risk, and their name in the city and everything's done correctly there. They're pretty good at that, though. The most important things, well, let me touch on one other thing. The airport liability at the very bottom. Airport liability has been flat for probably 10 years and decreasing, and just a very soft market, and they were giving out high limits and more coverage and more than you can imagine. And in the last 2 years, that has just taken a 180-degree turn and tightened up quite a bit. So what we did was it went up just a little bit, not much. The deductible went up out to the right. You'll see that in red. But we went ahead and got a 3-year policy on that because rates are going up, and we wanted to go ahead and lock it in. So I think that was a good decision. Then the next section that's important is the law enforcement and the public official and employment practices liability. Out to the right, you'll see that the deductibles are in red, and we've been able to hold these at $10,000 for a long time. And most of the metro Atlanta cities are all at a higher deductible than that. And last year, we were able to keep it down. And so any claims we've had in the past, which we've had some law claims, would still be at that $10,000 deductible. But this year, they've increased the deductible to $25,000. And we got an option to keep that lower, but the option really cost more than what the average number of claims we would have and what the deductible would be. So I like having the going with the higher deductible because it gives us a little bit more control over the claims too. So we can get in there and the city's more involved in the legal aspect of the claims than most are, frankly. So we've talked about it, and we think that's the best way to go with that. Same with the public official and the employment practices liability. Had a couple of claims there that were driving that, but they wanted to go to 25, and we kept them at 15. So that's just a brief summary of what we have. I'm very pleased with this. Right now, of the 300 cities we have, I would say almost all of them are seeing more than 5%, less than 10% unless they have bad experience increases. And that's just a general industry move that you see in the business cycle. So these premiums have been within a few percentage points for 8 to 9 years. So I wish all my other stuff was that way. So I think we've got a good renewal here. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Seville?
Okay.
Hearing none, we need a motion from the committee to present the renewal to full council.
I'll offer that motion.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Malcolm, second by Mr. Little. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We recommend the
Thank
renewal
y'all.
to full council.
Thank you for coming, Bob.
Last item on our agenda this evening, no, it's not. Approval of out-of-state travel. Who's going?
Thank you, Mr. Radcliffe. This is the request for out-of-state travel for myself and 2 of my staff members in the finance department to attend the Tyler Conference, which is in Orlando, Florida, April 26th through April 30th. Tyler software is the software that we recently converted to in citywide, which is all of our financials, utility billing, And this will be the first conference that we're able to attend. And since it is our first, they have offered to give us 1 free registration with 2 paid attendees, and that's the reason we're having 3, which there were enough classes to cover for all 3 of us, so that way we could cover every basis, utility billing, payroll, financials, accounts payable, general ledger, and all aspects. So this is well under budget at $7,600. This covers travel, hotel, and conference registration.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Thompson? Hearing none, we need a motion to approve the out-of-state travel.
Make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Little,
Second.
second by Ms. Malcolm. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Recommend that to full council next week as well. Item, our fourth item is a travel policy update, and I understand Mr. Bailey's gonna handle that.
Yes, sir, thank you. Kind of ties to the item we just discussed, and we've had several out-of-state training requests over I know that at least the past 5-6 months, it seems like public safety and finance with Tyler, because they're based, they have different conferences out of state. Public safety has a lot of conferences, a lot of training, seminars and whatnot that are offered out of state, both on police and fire. We were asking that the travel policy be updated because it states currently that any out-of-state travel has to come before council for approval, whether it's budgeted or not. But what we're asking for is to adjust and amend the policy to state that if it's already approved in the budget and it was approved in the prior year's budget creation by city council, that as long as it's within the parameters of what was already presented, that's approved already without having to come before council. Now, if it's something that pops up that's outside of what council had already approved, then it still comes before council. But like what Beth's attending, and I know what RV has sent several officers to over the last few months, was already within the budget, that would be acceptable. So we're just asking to make that amendment to the travel policy, save us a little bit of time, and it's more of a kind of a bookkeeping kind of concern. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Here, I'm not on your committee, if I could ask a question. When you talk about approved by the budget, are you talking about finances being approved or the actual trip being approved?
Technically, we could do either, or both. It would be the actual budget numbers, I would say, approved, as long as it's within the realm of the money that was put in that line item. Or if it's something that the council would ask that we have that trip as best we can planned out for the future, but we are gonna have some that are gonna pop up, I know, during the year. But I mean, truth be told, that's at the request of the council.
I just think most of the ones we've seen, the ones from public safety, I don't know whether the chief knew last November
Correct.
that these were going to be there, so I guess I just question.
But if he didn't know,
out.
you would have had to come out
Yeah.
specifically to the council each month. This is just something that they know in advance and budget for, so not to have to come back and
I
have.
think if you, I'm not on this committee, but I would be in favor of that as long as the trip itself's approved, not just the money.
So you're saying if something like with public safety, if something comes up, an opportunity arrives after the budget is passed and it's not something that was considered in the budget amount, it would come to us?
Yeah, I'm saying it's like, he may have put something in the budget and says, we're gonna put, I'll pick a number, $10,000 for out-of-state travel, right?
Right.
Well, but when this comes up, this particular one was not one he knew about, but he still got money in the budget. I would think that still needs to come back before, so we are aware of people that are going out of state, I guess, for trips. That's all I'm saying.
I think the real impetus for this was over the last few months. I know I've talked to Wayne and a few others that we've had these out-of-state travel requests that end up being far cheaper than a lot of our in-state. They're usually sponsored by somebody. So they kind of became kind of a little bit of a time waster. I hate to use that term, but a little bit of a time waster as far as just getting it through and making sure that we could go and train up in a timely manner.
And I don't have a problem if a budget of 10,000 is set and, you know, it may be that another more worthwhile conference comes about that is equal in value, and leave that to the discretion of the department head and the city manager to decide. I don't particularly care to have to see the specific event.
And I think that's how this is written here, if it falls within the budget. And of course, you know, during the budget season, I guess we call it, each department head puts together their list of anticipated travel to build that budget line item. So there's not gonna be a whole lot that's out of the realm of normal. It's just kind of a little cleanup item we're trying.
When you would treat it as kind of a substitution, I mean, if you had something that was more worthwhile out of state and you could get more out of it, then you would substitute the out of state for the in-state.
Is that something that you just don't want to come before council and ask for? Because I don't think council have a problem approving. Matter of fact, I don't think we never turn down a single out-of-state travel fee for anyone. So I'm really trying to figure out, is it just something to keep from coming before council and asking about it?
No, sir. The real reason is, for instance, when, you know, RV found that one good training a few months ago, the way the timing on the calendar worked out, it was really hard to squeeze it in on agenda by the time he had to come here. So it's really a timing thing. Sometimes, depending on how the calendar falls, you could have a 5 to 6 week lead time on being able to get it approved through the council, when, if it's an in-state travel, you know, they just go.
And they also fill up if they're a popular.
Right. So,
Yeah, but I don't think none of that stuff is pop-up stuff. I mean, usually the events we go to is the same basically every year. So they actually own calendars.
Well,
They plan on doing the different
Out of
events or
state,
whatnot.
they could.
well, for instance, Rodney went to that the wastewater, I guess, it was a training event in Chicago, where he got to look at the new systems that we're looking at for our wastewater plant. And, you know, that one kind of came out of left field, but it was 100% sponsored. And, you know, if we had to squeeze that one on at the last second with you guys just to get it approved per policy, I'm not saying it's common, but it's happened a handful of times in the last few months.
Well, to follow up on what Ms. Malcolm was saying, I mean, isn't this in some ways an example of how sometimes micromanagement really doesn't work? I mean, the council, in my view, needs to deal with the big picture things. And, you know, we sit in here and we vote on things that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars sometimes. I don't know why really we need to be looking at whether folks are going for out-of-state training. If the money's there in the budget, the department heads, I think, need to be able to react quickly so they don't lose opportunities. And to me, it just seems micromanagement for all of those things to have to come before us. So I think if it's in the budget, let the department heads do it. That's their job, not ours.
I agree.
I don't think no council member micromanaging nothing, because we seem to always approve anything they ask for. So I don't understand what you mean micromanaging.
Well, the point is, why do they even need to bring it up here?
Why do they need to
and I
come to
agree
council
with you.
period then?
I agree with you. We do normally approve them, so it's like, why are we even doing that? What's the point of it?
So
What's the difference between traveling in-state and traveling out-of-state? I just don't see it. I just think it's sort of a waste of time.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you need a motion?
We need a motion.
Yes.
To present to full council.
I'll make the motion to approve as written and presented.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And opposed?
I oppose.
Thank you.
Motion carries, and we'll go present that to full council next week. Thank you, Mayor. That's all the items we have in finance this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Adcock, Mr. Garrett, Airport Committee.
Chris Bailey?
Thank you, sir. The airport report will be fairly short. And really, the only update is the city of Monroe went through the entire execution of the contract for the for the runway rehabilitation design, that was a typo, for the fiscal 2020 budget for the state. So once they get the design, everything put together, they submit it to the state. And at that point, we're already applied for the actual runway rehabilitation, and hopefully we get that in what's the state's budget year of 2021. And then, other than that, the hangar bill that we've discussed previously, that y'all approved the land lease, that's still tracking along. We're kind of in the contract agreement phase of getting everything kind of hammered out with surveys, topo, drainage plan, all of that, but we're still looking good. So fingers crossed. That's all I've got.
Does anybody have any questions for Chris? If not, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Public Works, Mr. Dickinson. Excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Smith, we need the solid waste report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. We attached a couple of annual tonnage reports. I'm going to highlight them in a few minutes. Under the items of interest, we have an EPD update, and I am happy to report that as a permit by rule operating facility, the transfer station is exempt from the 5-year review process. The rule applies to landfills and PBRs that's actually on the landfill site. We still required to maintain the facility according to EPD guidelines to stay in compliance, which is directly related to our transfer station projects. Currently, the drainage project is complete. We have scheduled in 2 weeks to meet with the contractor for the tipping floor to go over scope of work and a site review and schedule the actual work. The welding, we're going to schedule it for next month, so we should be getting that out of the way. And the tonnage report, I'm going to go over the extended hours. We did a running total of what from January of 2019 for the whole year. We actually generated $277,000 in revenue by opening the transfer station from 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock. But we also spent over $237,000, and most of that expense came from transportation, tipping fees, and a little labor costs. So we did generate a surplus of $41,221.17 for 2019. And the last report is the collection and recycling report that we normally do. Our diversion rate was down a little bit to 9% for 2019. I just want to highlight the tipping fees for 2019. Under the garbage and trash collecting, it cost us $437,000. Our diversion, the money we saved by not putting it in the landfill, was a little over $50,000, so we actually spent over $386,600. I take any question that you might have on any of the reports.
All right, no questions. Mr. Still, Streets and Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Unless you have some direct questions regarding the report, I'll just highlight some of the things we got going on right now. We've been assisting some of the central services guys inside some of the parks, doing some cleanup, getting some good progress going in those areas. We've done some right-of-way maintenance. Our leaf truck is still out and about. We are coming to an end of the leaf season. I think with the inclement weather we got coming this week, it may knock every leaf that's still left on the ground, and we get it to the curb and we'll get it up. So I'm anticipating a couple more weeks of the leaf truck running, and then parking it for the season and only going out when we have a work order called in for that. right-of-way crew's been out, done a little bit of cutting, more litter pickup than anything else. We continue to maintain and patch some utility cuts. And the biggest thing that you probably could tell right away was we've completed the takedown of the lights and shielders. That was a great project, and we'll be a lot more prepared for that next year as far as time and efficiency of getting that up and down. Other than that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Jeremiah, the outstanding job in Childers. It just, I get comments every day.
I'm still getting positive comments on how that turned out. They turned out really nice.
Well, we appreciate it, and tell your guys.
That's all we have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. Moving to public safety, Mr. Bradley.
Yeah, we'll start with the fire department report from Chief Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Before you have your numbers that finished out for 2019, the fire department ran a total of 2,471 calls last year. Other than that, we basically, our recruit class is actually going through their testing process right now. We're planning to start their very first class on February 18th. And we did send a group, along with myself, up to the Capitol Day, which was Firefighter Recognition Day at the state capitol. And so we were up there and was able to participate with the governor and the award ceremonies they had up there. The only other thing I wanted to make note of is, since we've been keeping the records on our fire loss and saves, 2019 was the lowest year that we have had on record as far as fire loss property-wise within the city of Monroe. I'd love to champion and say our community risk reduction is doing super, super great, but we're still way too early to start screaming that number yet. Just take a few more years of data to really see where we're going, but it's a good thing. Yeah, at the end of the day, when we see months where we didn't have fires, we didn't have house fires, that's just a good thing for the city in general. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Bill, the 2,471 calls that you did during the year, do you know how that compared to previous years?
That is, we progressively go up every year. That's just a rough saying. I do know last year, I think we were sitting about 2,700, so we're down a little bit this year. But I can tell you from looking at the numbers over the last 20 years, they typically, they'll spike up and they'll jump extremely high, and then they'll plateau, might even bottom out a little bit, and then they'll just spike up again. So trending wise, yeah, we'll just continue to climb. Just with the population. As the population of the city goes up, our call volume goes up.
And anyone else have any questions? Then we'll move on to the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. So for the month of December, we had a total calls for service of 1,641 calls. And something that I wanted to note here was our area checks. Our officers have been very proactive in checking subdivisions and even downtown businesses. They did a total of 4,405 area checks. And so with our year end, we ended up with a total of 32,252 calls for service, and we did 27,656, which put us around 60,000 calls for service. I like to add the area checks in there with the actual 911 calls showing, because that's an action taken by an officer. So it was 59,908 calls we actually responded to and dealt with. Calls to the PD, 1,256. Our Part 1 crimes, we finished the year, we were down at 10, right at 11%. Our Part 2 crimes are up, but in researching that, my reasoning that I believe it's up is because of the Joint Operations Unit that we implemented this past year. They've been hammering them on drug cases, executing search warrants, and actually for this month of December, they did 2 search warrants and made a total of 8 felony arrests. But that's what's increasing that number, why the Part 2 crimes are up. Our officers actually participated in couple of community events. We had our Christmas parade in December, I think went very well without any issues. We also did our Shop with a Cop, where we were able to sponsor 11 children's for Christmas. And we had 3 officers that we sent to the police academy that's actually new on our police force. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Chief Parks? Did I think he has a
Yes, sir.
item to present? Yeah.
Going back to what you guys were talking about earlier on the changing of the travel policy, this is a prime example of that. So we have one officer's at canine training right now that we approved last month, and then we have one that needs to be approved for this month to go back for recertification. These are going to be annual research for all 3 canines that they'll be going back to Alabama to get recertified with, and that's what this one is here, is for Officer Jacob Palmer to go back for recertification. And again, the total cost is going to be $840. That's just per diem, and then the cost of the research.
All of our canine training is done in Alabama, correct?
Their actual certification and recertification, but when they're here, they train every day. These guys are working.
I mean, the training we send people to.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Any questions?
And would this have been budgeted, or would this?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
We actually have a line item just for the canine units themselves, as well as training. We have a line item for training and for canine.
We have a motion?
I make a motion, we recommend this to full council next week.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Bradley,
Second.
second by Mr. Dickinson, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We'll recommend that to full council next week. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Ms. Malcolm, Planning and Code.
Yes, Mr. Kelly, do you have the monthly code report?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Malcolm. Just some highlights from the December report. We had a total of 103 permits written in that month. We had 2 new business license applications. First time seen this in a while, 0 closed businesses for that month. Moving on to the city marshal section, they removed 89 signs from the roadway, wrote 146 repair cleanup orders. That's a little bit down, but it was also contributable to PTO and making up some time that needed to be taken off or losing it. So that should be picking back up January, February. They investigated 4 tampering and theft cases, issued 6 citations, and they completed 40 hours of post-training. And if you have any questions about the balance of the report, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? Okay. So then we have a surplus of real property. Are you going to take that?
Yes, ma'am, I will take that. Some of you have asked before if we could look at surplusing some of our extra real property, maybe get it back on the tax rolls. Found a couple here that we can't seem to really find a need for anymore. It's parcels number M011009 and 94, 2 different parcels off of what used to be known as McKinley Street. Some of you may have a little bit more history on that than I do. I think it long predates me in the city. But essentially, these are off Robert Street and lie at a cul-de-sac area, just above Highway 78, the old bypass. And we can't really find a use for them. So here they are for consideration.
So tell me the process you'll go through if we choose to put those back out on the open market.
So generally, if it's a GDOT project, if I remember correctly, Paul, you may have to help me out, that the neighboring property owners get first right of refusal. Then it can go through the sealed bid process.
Basically, if this is something y'all want to do, we have to go through the entire legal process. So this is for, if you make a motion to begin the process of surplusing it, then we will begin that process in accordance with Georgia law. And so there's multiple paths that we can take. We'd have to look at this dirt in particular. I'm assuming it's remnant dirt that has a value of less than an estimated fair market value of less than $30,000. I'm assuming, I've looked at it briefly on the map, it almost appears landlocked, that it also is unbuildable. Because of that, there's a particular path that's sort of the quicker and easier path that would first start with contacting all neighboring landowners, giving them an opportunity to purchase it for fair market value. But before any actual action, before any selling action occurs, it would come back before you guys. This would get us the ability to get started. And we would make sure that we follow Georgia law on surplusing of the real property. It can go on the open market via auction. It can go on the open market via being listed with a real estate agent. That would be a decision for you to make later. Most likely, we would take the sort of low-hanging fruit path of the less than $30,000, where we can direct contract with neighboring property owners.
But yeah, like he said, this just starts the process in declaring it as surplus.
So one of these, does it actually have frontage on Highway 78? Or is that an arterial, I mean, are there no
it
assigned
does.
curb cut?
It does, but it doesn't have a curb cut, so it backs off that cul-de-sac right there.
Do I have any other questions? Do I have a motion?
I move that we surplus these properties.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
It passes. I think that's it.
It passes. Thank you, Ms. Malcolm. Referring economic development to our newest parent on council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Crosby, would you mind sharing with us the monthly economic development report, please, ma'am?
Yes, I'd be happy to. End of January, we did have our downtown annual reception where we thank our sponsors and present some awards to, for excellence to Volunteer of the Year, Renovation of the Year, Business of the Year, and Sponsor of the Year. And you can see the winners there. There's a photo from the reception with the award winners. And then we also kind of do a year in review and present that. And just I put a summary of the numbers from last year, performance downtown. It was a very good year for downtown development. A lot of new businesses, a lot of new job growth, and so we're excited about that. Also want to just make you all aware that we have just finally completed and submitted a number of grants that relate to other projects within the city, one being the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program grant. That is the one that ties into Town Green and the Rails to Trails project. We should be hearing back about that one this month, hopefully. Also, we are in the process of applying, you'll have a resolution later in the agenda for the historic survey grant to update our historic resource survey. This is a requirement for us to maintain our certified local government status. So this would be a grant that would offset the cost, pay for half of that survey cost for us to hire a consultant to do the historic survey of properties that qualify. And we also found a National Fish and Wildlife grant that we've applied for to be matching funds for street trees along Spring Street to complete that sidewalk work and streetscaping project that we have that has been completed, in the process of being completed. Trees are always a part of the plan. If we get this grant, we'll be able to get them here quicker and installed in a faster fashion. So all those were completed at the end of last month, and we'll be hearing for those in the next few months. We'll be giving you updates. So excited about that. The only thing to mention is we do have Chocolate Walk, first of our big events coming up. We also have an Arbor Day celebration. And then I put a flyer next to the agendas there. The Monroe Minority Business Association has been forming this year, and they're going to host the first annual Black History Month Gala and recognize 10 historic members from the African American community that have had lots of influence here in Monroe. And so I told them I would get that before you. There'll be more information soon, but that's exciting to see that event coming together for the first time. If you have any questions about anything else on there, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Anyone have any questions? Not, back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Ms. Crawford, Parks.
Thank you. We have our monthly parks report by Logan.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. I think, to begin with, I'm going to defer this one over to Mr. Bailey, as he's been heading up some of our new park maintenance updates and some projects.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to give just as quick of a rundown as I can on what we've done over the last, 3 weeks since we officially took some of these. Our parks manager, Chris Schmidt, has coordinated a lot of this, especially at Matthews Park with the help of Streets Department. We've filled potholes, we've trenched where the parking area would always collect water right there at the bigger awning, right in front of the lake, to where that'll drain. Added trash cans. We removed the dumpster that was an issue out there of people just throwing any and everything. We've cleared brush on the backside of the dam on some of the other areas. We're pulling up the T-posts that used to mark the old plants and the walk that went through way back when, but that's something that we'll bring back. We just need to reevaluate it and probably replant some of them because the trees, bushes, and whatnot weren't there anymore, but the sign was. So just an overall cleanup and management of the park and meeting with the organizations. I think I'd mentioned last month, the Frisbee Golf Organization. They have 50, 60 members that are active out there, and they're willing to work with us and have some cleanup events and some different things, and just kind of partner with us on different things that we do as we kind of accumulate SPLOST dollars throughout the year before we get into the big overall renovation and rehabilitation of the park. Pilot Park, we have met with half a dozen contractors over the past 2 to 3 weeks to discuss kind of the design that the council had already seen for the park, and then to get their input on different areas and what we could do. Our hopes are to bring back in April the different components of that, because we'll have to put out an RFP to actually get the playground equipment kind of proposed to us. We'll do the very best we can at, asking for apples to apples, but it's going to be vendor dependent kind of on what they bid, because they're not going to have the exact same equipment. But just an overall rehabilitation of that park, and I would hope that we could get it reopened by the summer months. But that'll be kind of contingent on weather, schedules, the timing of everything. But I think that would be a great one to jump into early part of this year and kind of make an example of what we can do with the parks. Childers Park, obviously, Public Works spent a great deal of time putting up lights, taking down lights. I think they'll for sure streamline the process for this year after going through it once and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. But just looking to kind of keep that park up to speed of what's going on. We'll replace the sod and the grass in the dog park, just because it's been worn down because of traffic. But that won't be a very high cost. And then, obviously, I'm bringing before you is the next item for the lake build-out at Childers will be kind of our first parks project that I can foresee. And I'll be happy to answer any questions before we move into that.
Just one question. On that transformer area at Childers Park, after, I can't remember, 3 years ago, we were told that MEAG would go in and do a planting around that. And they did go in and they did plant, but they were very small and it's still an eyesore. Is there any way we could go back and appeal to them to help us, since we're going to be spending so much money in that park, to come back and try to screen that a little bit better?
Well, and I'm sure absolutely we can. I know that on the Spring Street side, we have the entrance that goes, it used to look like an entrance. It's kind of still one where the pavement and everything is just eroded completely away. We're going to remove that. Once we get the dam feature, the lake, everything built, to clear out a lot of those trees that are blocking and impeding that view of the park from Spring Street. But I would think that we could probably go back and appeal to them to work with us and do more, or allow us to do it.
Right.
Either way that, correct, either way that fixes that as an eyesore and takes your eyes off of that and gets it to more of what the park's supposed to look like. Bless you. So, yes.
Maybe we
It's absolutely
do that.
worth a try.
Thank you.
Any more questions? We have another item, the Childers Park project request. Chris, you wanna take it?
Okay. Yeah, this was, as I had just said, we're, the lake feature that we had looked at with the dam, the aeration fountain, and there's a picture on the next page. You guys have seen, and it's what's been presented to you, and it's kind of what we're looking at as the first project. And what we're asking for is, we essentially had a budget allocation on this item of about $100,000. but we're asking for an overall project budget of 90,000 to then take, and then we'll bid out the different items that we need, the building of the dam, the grading, the installation of the pipe, the material, different things of that, nature. I feel like we'll come in under budget without any issue, but we just wanted kind of that project budget to start with before we proceed with everything, so we know where that is, and then we'll come back and bring that final cost to you once everything's done, so we could proceed.
Any questions?
And one note, we have that Corps of Engineer permit, so we gotta do it this year, or the permit will lapse, and that's a pain to get. So we wanna go ahead and get started on this project right away. And this is really gonna help keep that erosion at bay. I'm sure you've probably seen it out there looking at the Christmas lights. It is inching back, month after month with each heavy rain, so, this lake should help mitigate that a little bit.
I'll make a motion, we recommend this full council.
Second.
It passes, will be recommended for council for next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Moving to items of discussion, public hearing for the rezone at 329 Barrett Street. Mr. Stone?
I'll be taking that, Mr. Mayor.
He here?
Kelly will have to take it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, this rezone is just in an effort to place the historic home on Barrett Street in a carved-out parcel from the current PRD zoning. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. It's really just a matter of making a place for that historic house to be moved to.
And this is a typical R1 lot, right?
Yeah, it meets all the
Right.
R1 requirements, yes.
Won't impede like the one on Boulevard,
No,
the setbacks.
no, this one will be code compliant, or ordinance compliant.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Kelly? Moving to the public hearing for conditional use, 1110 South Madison Avenue. Patrick?
Yes, sir. Thank you again. As it says on the cover sheet, it's a single-family residence in the R1A zone residential area. It's currently adjacent to M1 parcels, but we're trying to encourage less intensive development in those areas. Plus, we have the rails to trails, I didn't note that in here, that we're looking to go right behind that place. And it's a residential use, but it's a commercial enterprise as a personal care home. So we've recommended a denial of it for the reasons highlighted in the items for consideration listed below. And planning and zoning also recommended for denial on that one.
Are there any questions for Mr. Kelly?
How many people would that be housed in this? Because I know it's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yes, and I think the owner said that it would house 4 people and a caretaker. They'll be able to be more specific next week when they're here, but I believe that's the intention.
Are they planning on pouring any kind of parking lot, or?
No, they indicated that the people that would be housed there wouldn't necessarily have vehicles, and that the only vehicle that'd be regularly parked there would be the caretaker. But visitors and such as that may require some sort of parking. Again, we recommend a denial because it's a conditional use and development pattern that we wish to encourage over there, even though they're surrounded by the motorcycle club and the restaurant/convenience store and the concrete plant behind them. We're looking to repurpose all that for more residential or recreational uses, and therefore, this wouldn't necessarily fit in for residential development for single-family homes.
But yet we can have the type dwelling that we discussed on another side of town where people are housed for a fee of $35 a week in a residential neighborhood. That's just puzzling to me.
I don't know where we're talking about for $35 a week, but don't know that that's anything that's ever been approved as a conditional use.
So if he wanted to do this at this location, couldn't he come back and just apply for a B1 rezone and be compliant with everything around him? Because he's an island.
Yeah, he can ask for anything that would make him compliant, certainly. And it's up to you all to determine whether that's the direction that it should go or not.
So
But yeah, he's got every right to ask for
I
whatever.
mean, this just seems to be a less invasive use, just by way of a conditional use, than to come and apply for a B1, which would be hard, in my opinion, to deny, because he's surrounded by business.
That's
I
one.
mean, I'm just, when I looked at it and I pulled it up on the map, you know, it,
Yeah, and that's his argument as well, and I understand that. Like I said, I'm here to represent the process, not the outcome, but, yeah, if you feel it's a approvable conditional use, you certainly have the purview to do so. It just didn't seem conducive to the redevelopment that we see in the area once we can potentially get the concrete plant going in the right direction and the rails to trails. It just seemed more like a walkable residential type thing. But again, not my decision, just our
yeah,
recommendation.
I was just trying to, grasp the whole concept. Thank you.
But we'll discuss that one further. Are there any other questions for Mr. Kelly? Moving to the public rezone on 341 North Broad Street. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, this is a currently split zoned property. The majority of it is R1. Applicants requesting a variance, a zoning and a variant, yes, a zoning change and a variance to comply with the zoning ordinance. The lot frontage variance is sought due to the unique circumstances of the water tower parcel limiting the street frontage and precluding acquiring the necessary frontage. And additionally, the applicant is currently seeking the rezone of the professional zoning portion of the lot to R1 so that they can utilize it for single-family residential development.
Are there any questions for Mr. Kelly?
Mayor, just need to notate on the record that this rezone request is by an entity in which I have a controlling interest, and so my office would be conflicted out from providing any legal advice. So should the council need any legal advice on this item, item number 3, or item number 4, then the city administrator would need to retain conflict counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal.
I have one question. So there'll be 2 curb cuts off Broad and 1 off Marable?
I believe that's correct.
I just don't see the curb cut.
The current curb cut on Broad Street will remain, and then there's going to be a common drive alley to service actually all 3 of the parcels that are going to be developed.
But is that showing on here? I don't see that alley.
It's got,
That has a proposed alley behind tracks 1 and 2,
Oh.
coming off of Marable
Okay.
Street.
Okay, now I see it. I was looking at the wrong one.
Yeah, me too. I was too. Any additional questions? So regarding point number 4, Mr. Kelly, same thing?
Yeah, it's pursuant to the same action. They're just needing the variance due to, like I said, the unique circumstances regarding the water tower limiting even acquiring the potential for that frontage.
Any questions about item number 4? Hearing none, we'll move to the comprehensive plan update. Mr. Probst?
Thank you, Mayor. Before you is a comprehensive plan update due to the fact that we have a CDBG application in order, and in DCA's wisdom, they've decided they need the term grants placed in here so that we can get our funding. Deborah Smith is here if you have anything else to add to this, but
Ms. Smith, would you like to come forward? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deborah Smith. I really wasn't planning to do this, but I did. The The comprehensive plan update is to add the project that the city is applying for into the comprehensive plan, because DCA states if the project's not in the plan, it won't get funded. So we're doing a storm and drainage project, streets and drainage projects, so we have to add that to the comprehensive plan. That's a little, it looks like an excerpt out of your comprehensive plan, I guess, what you have before you.
Yeah, so because
Do you want me to address?
if it was a locally funded project, we probably wouldn't have to update this, but since it's federally funded CDBG, yeah, we gotta update with the project and funding terms.
And if it's okay, I'll address number 9 as well, service delivery.
Yes, ma'am, please.
That's exactly what Logan was saying, DCA says. I'm gonna be really nice about this. The word grants has to be in your funding method on your service delivery, or you cannot get community development block grant funds. It's a thing they told us about in December. So tonight, Walton County passed this. Last night, Jersey and Good Hope passed it. So we're getting all of the communities, social circles applying to, so everybody's doing it in the community. We've got it on everybody's February agenda. And then you just have your normal resolution for CDBG on there too. Good.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Are there any questions before she sits? Don't say yet. We're good. Thank you, Mr. Probst. Moving to approval of the major subdivision, 945 Holly Hill Road. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a major subdivision creating over 5 lots. It's a subsequent division of property from a recently recorded minor subdivision in which they created 4 new lots. It requires review and approval by the Planning and Zoning and the City Council per the development regulations, and that's why it's before you at this time. They're all along McDaniel Street, and this will make a total of 10 lots, considering the 4-lot subdivision they did as a minor, and this major subdivision creating 6 more.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Kelly?
I have a question. Since that minor did not have to come before the council with the 4 lots, but it seems like as soon as that was approved by staff, then the major one was submitted. My question is, why are these 10 lots not all together now for our consideration?
We suggested that he go ahead and develop a comprehensive plan for all the land use that he wanted to do. He wanted to move forward with the 4 lots because he was telling us back in October when this 4 lots were approved that he wasn't sure how he was going to proceed. Now, take that for what it's worth, but now we have 6 more in front of us.
I don't think anything's happened on those 4.
No,
Yes.
nothing more than a survey and recording of the plat.
So I guess my question is, should not we consider all 10 together?
I don't know that legally we can consider all 10 together.
Yeah, the 4's done. It's approved and recorded, but the 6 before you, because it's a subsequent subdivision of the same parcel and creating more than 5 lots.
Sure puts it in a bad light.
It sure does.
Makes me-
And it sure is going to impact that street
Yeah. It
in a very negative way.
causes me to question the validity of any of the things that's been done. So, I just think it leaves it a bad light.
This gentleman also owns or owned the property, the new house that's being built on the corner of Pinecrest, the lot that's been cleared, the new house that's under construction, one that the footings have been poured all on Holly Hill. And it looks like he has 2 or 3 more lots marked off.
He doesn't own the corner. I
Doesn't?
sold that tract. No, that's individually owned.
Okay.
He doesn't own
Yeah,
that.
I'm sorry, I was saying it as a question.
Oh, no, yeah, no.
No, not to be accusing, I was just,
No.
there's a lot going on Holly
Right,
Hill.
there is.
So,
And it's
That's-
very misleading that this is labeled 945 Holly Hill, when it's actually McDaniel Street that's being
but
impacted.
the parcel was officially Holly Hill address. I mean, I
Yeah.
get it.
But
None
I
of
can
this
tell
parcel
you that none of the
touches Holly
neighbors
Hill
knew
at all.
anything about it. And that's unfortunate too.
None of this parcel touches Holly Hill, to my understanding.
No,
No, the original parcel was the Henson piece. So as it is broken off, then it will be, they'll have McDaniel addresses.
But there again, it's still very misinterpreted, you know, and
Right, I understand.
for whatever it's worth, I think it should have actually, you know, at some point been labeled / McDaniel Street Development.
Are we, well, before I ask, are there any other questions?
Mr. Kelly, on the setbacks of 30 feet, that is traditional R1. Did the Planning and Zoning Committee discuss that this 30-foot setback is far shallower than any other house on that street, and that a 30-foot setback is going to greatly compromise the integrity of McDaniel Street on 10 lots and 10 driveways pulling out onto McDaniel?
Yeah, I don't know what the full discussion was when the dimensional table was determined, but 30 feet is what was determined for collector and neighborhood streets. Arterial streets have a 40-foot setback, and that's based on a 100-foot right-of-way, which we have very limited arterial streets in the city.
Do we know, number one, because Ms. Malcolm's right, in the 10 driveways within, I believe I measured it at around 850 total
1,000
feet.
square. It's 10 lots at 100 feet each. So
Well, they're not all 100 feet. That's what I mean.
They're all 100 feet, and it's about 1,050 total.
So,
and that's 11 driveways, by the way.
that being said, can we ask the developer to do a couple of shared driveways? Do we know the housing type sizes that he intends to put in? Are we just simply having the lots in front of us?
He's merely at this time requesting a subdivision of the property. You can ask, request, condition, whatever you like on the request. It's up to you for review and approval. So
Well, I'm concerned for safety as well, and I'm sure that's what you were implying.
Right.
And the sight distance there, and for the people on the opposite side of the road pulling out of their driveways, I've already been told that it's quite, for them, it's quite dangerous toward the end, up toward Breedlove. When they pull out, they don't have a good sight distance. And I'd like to propose that we consider a traffic study by engineer. But that's just my thoughts.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I just follow one thing Ms. Malcolm said there. I know that earlier we had talked about when people requested subdivisions, and we were primarily at that time talking about larger subdivisions, that we would do impact studies and traffic studies. And I just wondered if anything's been done on this particular one.
Not on this one. It didn't really meet the thresholds that we'd previously discussed.
But if it was 10 lots, it might.
What did we discussed? I think it was 20 or 30 lots. But we do have some current traffic data, actually from our little radar sign that we can preliminarily give you. And then I can go ahead and engage with an engineered traffic study if that so satisfies. But what that would need to do is push this back a little bit. So that would probably have to table this item in order to comply with that engineering study. There's no way I could turn that around in a week.
Can we propose that now, or do we have to wait until next week?
I would wait until next.
Wait till next week.
That's what I thought.
And just one additional question. For what we're considering on this, does this have a public hearing involved with it?
It would next week.
It's not listed on here as a public hearing.
Approval.
No, it doesn't have a public hearing because it's not considered a zoning action under the zoning procedures law. That's your trigger that requires your public hearings. So this is in essence, an ministerial process whereby you are approving the subdivision of these lots for approval of a plat under your development reg, so it doesn't require a public hearing. You you certainly can entertain public comment should you so desire.
And I would like to ask that we do entertain.
Yes, ma'am, I agree. And I agree with you. I believe Mr. Dickinson said earlier, I do find it a little disingenuous that he came in for 4 lots and then 2 months later comes back in to avoid full council review. But we'll make that known next week. Yes, sir.
And I did want to just note that he was advised that it'd be better to move forward with this full plan developed when we originally spoke with him, and that it would look bad, just like it does now, when he brought it forward for this subsequent subdivision. So you guys are seeing exactly how we saw it and advised him.
And am I correct, Patrick, that the 4 that were approved are small lots, only approximately a third of an acre each?
They're compliant R1 lots,
But I am correct, though, they're like
about a third of an acre. 14,000 is the minimum. I don't have that plat
And
in front of me.
1,600 square foot minimum, right?
Correct.
Is there any reason on the additional 6 lots that a setback that exceeds 30 feet would not work? I know there's some flood zone back.
Yeah, there's some sanitary sewer easement and some drainage through there that would need to be considered. I mean, they may even have to go a good deal further back to get a house on some of these lots, but I don't know that it'd be 30 feet immediately. And most builders, and I don't know if he's subdividing this to sell lots individually or if he's subdividing it to develop himself, most builders will try and match the average setback, which we could encourage or require.
Thank you.
There are 4 75-foot lots out of the 10. Moving to 321 Millage Avenue, major subdivision, Mr. Kelly.
Okay, yeah, this is the Madison Davis PRD, a portion of it that has been sold off to the builder, Bill O'Brien, who's looking to finish subdividing that property and develop it per the PRD, but in similar fashion to the houses he built near the Napa location that everybody kind of fell in love with. So he's looking to get that finally approved so he can record the lots and start building.
Good news for that area. Are there any questions? Hearing none.
Start building.
Well, he recorded 2 lots on a minor subdivision, and this is a major subdivision. Pretty much the same scenario we had on McDaniel Street, but it's the same piece of land that was already platted to be subdivided in this manner. So he has those first, actually, 2 large lots, 2 small lots, and now he's got 6 more that he's gonna record.
Any other questions, comments? Moving to comprehensive plan update. Mr.
Thank you,
Probst,
Mayor.
I'm sorry.
This
I
is
got stopped.
the same thing that we just discussed in resolution format. And that goes for comprehensive plan update, the service delivery strategy amendment, and then we'll have a 2020 CDBG application resolution as well to complete the trifecta here.
That's what threw me, that it was the same thing we just talked about. Are there any questions from Mr. Probst? Hearing none, right to the service delivery strategy amendment. Do you want to mention anything else?
We can keep rolling if
Any
unless anybody
questions?
has any questions.
Next is 2020 CDBG application. Any questions on that? You knocked it all out at the same time. A resolution opposing House Bill 302 and Senate Bill 172. Mr. Probst.
Thank you, Mayor. We dusted off this one from last year. At the time, it was just House Bill 302. Since then, a companion bill, Senate Bill 172, was dropped, and this is year 2 of this making its way through the Gold Dome. This is for preemption of local building design standards, and We have a resolution opposing this bill. I'll be happy to take any questions on it, but essentially it greatly limits cities' and counties' ability to enforce their own building design standards.
Are there any questions about either of these bills? Hearing none, we'll move to the resolution supporting Senate Bill 309.
So a bill we can get behind is Senate Bill 309. This is kind of the creation of a Local Government Infrastructure Finance Authority Act for broadband telecom. We already have our own system. We're very blessed and fortunate with that. But this gives us a better financing mechanism to make it even better. So in most of the same light as we go through GFA processes for water and wastewater, capital lending, we can do the same thing should this bill pass with the state financing authority for telecom infrastructure. So that's going to be a big one for us within Senate Bill 309.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Probst? Hearing none, Ms. Thompson, 2019 budget amendment.
Yes, this is a resolution proposing year-end budget amendments. This is in order to increase the revenues and expenses by $883,928.44 in order to have a balanced budget under the general fund. This allows me to finalize the 2019 financial statements for the auditors, so we can move forward with the audit. I just want to point out that not all overages are negative. Rather, most overages are offset by revenues. I will say revenues in the general fund exceeded budget by almost $1.1 million, and expenses exceeded budget and general fund by almost $884,000. And this is a resolution to amend the budget so that we can increase revenues and expenses.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, moving to approval of the GEMA-HS statewide mutual aid and assistance agreement. Mr. Probst.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to pass the ball to Chief Owens if he wants to comment on the mutual aid and mutual assistance.
Basically, what we have before us is the statewide mutual aid and assistance agreement. It's something that comes up every 4 years. This is basically the ground or framework that GEMA uses that we roll back to in the event of emergency, and who is authorized to declare the emergency and roll it back to GEMA, and then ultimately who's going to pay for it. And that's basically what we're coming into when state funds are going to come back into our community, is what this agreement is all about. Be happy to answer any questions y'all have on that.
Are there any questions or comments for Chief? Hearing none, we'll move to appointments of the tree board. Currently, we have 3 seats available on the tree board. Steve Brown's, Krista Carroll's, and Susan Pelham's terms have expired, or will expire on March 1st. Mr. Brown, Ms. Carroll, and Ms. Pelham have all confirmed they would like to be reappointed for another 3-year term. And we'll talk more about that later. Moving to schedule of fees, Fire Marshal's Office. Mr. Owens.
Before we have the schedule of fees, as we've taken over and the fire marshal is now doing inspections within the city, there is a schedule of fees that his office will need to be able to charge the businesses as we go through and perform the services. We basically set these fees as we compare to other jurisdictions around us, and then, of course, we compared it with the state's fees, that what we've been paying up to now. All of these fees are lower than the already set state fees. Anywhere from $25 to $125 less. It just depends on the fee itself. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, we'll move to the action items. First reading of GEM EBS Restated Defined Benefit Retirement Plan Ordinance. Mr. Probst.
Thank you, Mayor. Here before you is a resolution. Basically what we covered last month. GMEBS now needs this in a resolution or ordinance format rather than a resolution ordinance format. So we've brought that here before you tonight for the action.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Probst? Hearing none, Mr. Rosenthal?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, you already passed a similar resolution last month, and so we're going to have, this is just housekeeping to clean it up and get it in an ordinance form to satisfy GMEB's requirements. This is an ordinance to amend the Georgia Municipal Employees Benefit System Plan regarding the retirement plan for the employees of the City of Monroe. The Mayor and Council of the City of Monroe hereby ordain as follows. Following is an ordinance to amend the retirement plan for the employees of the City of Monroe in accordance with and subject to the terms and conditions set forth in the attached Georgia Municipal Employees Benefit Systems Defined Benefit Plan, Adoption Agreement, General Addendum, and Service Credit Purchase Addendum. When accepted by the authorized officers of the city and GMEBs, the foregoing shall constitute a contract between the city and GMEBs. All is authorized and provided pursuant to OCGA 4751 et sequitur. Be it ordained by the Mayor and Council of the City of Monroe, Georgia, and it is hereby ordained by their authority thereof. Article 1, the retirement plan for the employees of the City of Monroe, Georgia is hereby amended to set forth and subject to the terms and conditions stated in the following GMEBs Defined Benefit Plan Adoption Agreement, the General Addendum, and the Service Credit Purchase Addendum. See attached Exhibit A for the complete agreement, General Addendum, and Service Credit Purchase Addendum. Article 2, except as otherwise specifically required by law or by the terms of the agreement, the General Addendum, or the Service Credit Purchase Addendum, the rights and obligations under the plan with respect to persons whose employment or terms of office with the city was terminated for any reason whatsoever prior to the effective date of this ordinance are fixed and shall be governed by such plan, if any, as it existed and was in effect at the time of such termination. Article 3, all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are expressly repealed. However, the previously adopted GMEB's Defined Benefit Plan Adoption Agreement and any addendums thereto will remain in effect and be considered an addendum to the agreement. Article 4, this ordinance shall take effect from and after its adoption by the Mayor and the Council of the City of Monroe, Georgia. This constitutes the first reading, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Second reading will be next week. Moving to the resolution in support of the grant match applications for the 2020 Historic Preservation Fund CLG Survey and Planning Grant. Ms. Kralzik?
This is related to the grant application that we've applied for with the Historic Preservation Division to update our historical resource survey. It's a matching grant that will help us pay to hire the firm to do this, and as I stated, is a requirement to maintain our certified local government status.
Thank you, Sadie. Are there any questions? Hearing none, Mr. Rosenthal?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a resolution of the Mayor and Council of the City of Monroe, Georgia, supporting the city's grant match for application for the 2020 Historic Preservation Fund CLG Survey and Planning Grant. Whereas the City of Monroe, Georgia has been vested with substantial power to regulate the use and property within the city for the purposes of maintaining the health, moral safety, security, peace, and general welfare of the city, and whereas the city has the legislative power to adopt reasonable resolutions or regulations relating to property within the city for which no provision has been made by general law and which are not inconsistent with the Constitution of the State of Georgia or any charter provision applicable thereto, and whereas the city has within its city limits numerous historic properties for which the preservation and care thereof is of great importance and concern to the mayor and city council, city staff, and citizenry, and whereas city staff desires to engage in the application process for the 2020 Historic Preservation Fund CLG Survey and Planning Grant in order to further the betterment of the city's historic properties by way of updating the city's historic property survey and to maintain the city's status as a certified local government under the statewide Certified Local Government Program. And whereas the application process for the grant is necessary to receive the grant and accomplish an update to the city's historic property survey and maintain the city's status as a certified local government, and whereas the mayor and city council support the city's effort to engage in the application process for the grant, and whereas the mayor and city council desire to authorize the city to contribute a 40% match to the grant as required by the terms of the grant, and whereas the above referenced 40% match would not exceed the amount of $15,000 due to the maximum available amount awarded pursuant to the grant. Whereas all stated goals of this resolution are incorporated fully herein, now therefore be it resolved that the mayor and the city council of Monroe do hereby support the city's application for the grant as follows. Number 1, the preamble of this resolution shall be considered to be and is hereby incorporated by reference as if fully set out herein. Number 2, city staff is permitted to engage in the application process for the awarding of the 2020 Historic Preservation Fund CLG Survey and Planning Grant. Number 3, the required funding match on the part of the city is 40%. And the city shall contribute a maximum amount of up to $15,000 in available funds, with said funds to be used to represent the city's required 40% match for the 2020 Historic Preservation Fund CLG Survey and Planning Grant as awarded. So resolved this 4th day of February 2020. That is a resolution, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for Mr. Rosenthal? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Ross Bradley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Malcolm. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. That passes. Thank you, everybody, for your attention tonight. There was a lot to cover. I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Malcolm, a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Adcock. Just beat you, Ross. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Good night, everybody. Thank you.